We have a choice of smartphones, tomatoes, even trucks, because of competition. Sometimes the price is too high, sometimes the product doesn't work, and sometimes the service is lousy. But in that case, someone else can enter the market and take all the customers. So every company has to offer us something better to stay in business. Some succeed, but some fail. And it's that risk of failure that really scares us.
When a businessman faces trouble, a market threatens to disappear, or a new competitor arises, there are two things he can do. He can turn to the government for a tariff or a quota or some other restriction on competition, or he can adjust and adapt. In Hong Kong, the first option is closed. Hong Kong is too dependent on foreign trade so that the government has simply had to adopt a policy of complete non-interference. That's tough on some individuals, but it's extremely healthy for the society as a whole. Only the businessmen who can adapt, who are flexible and adjustable, survive, and they create good employment opportunities for the rest.
So this is the kind of boxes that you were producing here when Milton Friedman came by to visit?
Mr. Chung makes metal containers. Nobody's ordered him to. He does it because he's found that he can do better for himself that way than by making anything else. But if demand for metal containers went down, Mr. Chung would soon get that message.
And Mr. Jung is still here, and nowadays he produces more things for the tourist trade. But when only the flexible and adaptable survive, thank you, Mr. Jung, it means that other businesses fail. Economists call this constant renewal of the economy creative destruction. If we want to increase our wealth and opportunities, we have to stop doing old things in old ways and start doing innovative things in better ways. In other words, we have to be creative. But when consumers move on to new goods, it can be difficult and painful because old factories and old shops close and people lose their jobs. That is the destructive part. And yet, most economists think that creative destruction is necessary for economic development. Mrs. Lee starts out every day with her lunch, her teapot, and her cell phone. Cell phones are important for boat drivers around here because they used to pass messages by shouting to one another. Not terribly efficient and very bad for your voice. Hong Kong has the most cell phones in the world, 1.7 cell phones per person. But all around the globe we've seen a cell phone revolution. In 1980 there were 11 million cell phones on the planet. Today almost 4 billion people have access to cell phones. This is an example of creative destruction. It used to be all landlines made of copper, but now they become less and less important, especially in the developing world. This farmer in Bangladesh was always dependent on one buyer of her eggs and had to accept his prices. But now she can check the price of eggs in other village markets with her cell phone before she sells, and so she can negotiate a better price. In Tanzania, it used to be that the customer often had to sit and wait for hours at the butcher's for the meat to arrive. And sometimes in Peru, the meat had to wait because the customers didn't know that it was already there. Today, you coordinate the business with a cell phone, and the food ends up in people's stomachs and not in the garbage. We have rarely seen a technology that has meant so much for human development, but that was not the intention. The telecom companies wanted more market share. Those who adapted and distributed the technology locally wanted to make money, and butchers and egg farmers just wanted to improve their own lives. Adam Smith would say that it was as if they were led by an invisible hand when they rolled out this technology faster than any technology in world history. And many would say that this revolution did more to give the average person power and to reduce poverty more than any government program. But all progress comes at a cost. Market forces are both creative and destructive. As people buy cell phones, they ditch their home phones, And then there is no need for all those workers who used to connect homes to wires and repair telephone lines. And that is tens of thousands of people who worked hard and supported their families, and through no fault of their own lost their jobs, and whose skills might not be in demand as the technology takes a new leap. Some succeed in inventing the next smartphone and become incredibly rich. Others are stuck with an obsolete technology. Some win, some lose, and the result is something that most people have a problem with: inequality. Here in the United States, you've accepted more inequality of outcome. But the economy is not a zero-sum game. In other words, we're not fighting over ever smaller pieces of the pie. The pie is constantly growing larger as people and businesses become more productive. And the world is getting wealthier all the time. In the last 100 years, with relatively free markets, we have created more wealth than in the 100,000 years before. And as a result, we have reduced extreme poverty around the world, more than people ever dreamed was possible. 25 years ago, you had to work for 456 hours to be able to buy a cell phone. Today, after all the productivity increases that businesses and innovators have introduced, you only have to work for 4 hours. And of course, it's a better deal today. This is not just a phone. It also doubles as a texting device, a calendar, a camera, almost everything. In these same 25 years, the cost of a personal computer has been reduced from 435 hours to 25 hours. And you really couldn't compare it to those original PCs that wouldn't be able to run any of the software or the operating systems that we use today. People with a lot of money can afford to be early adopters. They can pay ridiculous amounts for the first versions of cell phones and personal computers. And that's a good thing for us, because they create bigger markets, so the companies get revenue, so that they can streamline production and create lower cost versions so that all of us can buy one. And historically, this seems to be the case. Free markets regularly turn luxuries into consumer goods. This may seem hard to believe, but the average rate of ownership for refrigerators, air conditioners, and dishwashers is higher among poor American households today than they were for all American households in the early 1970s.
Fresh eggs there. Chicken wing, chicken leg.
When people are free, they are able to use their own resources most effectively, and you have a great deal of productivity, a great deal of opportunity. The major beneficiaries are always the small man. The man who has power, who's at the top of a society, he's going to do well whatever kind of society you have. It's the society which gives the small man the opportunity to go his way, which is going to benefit him the most.